Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the plenary session for today. This session is on AI for student success, and we're going to have several presentations. I hope that will generate a lot of insights on how best we can use AI as well as technology in general to enhance student success in our institutions. I will just call upon Ashton before we start so that he can call the student to do us another poem.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So our next scholar for today is Qiraan Christians, who will be presenting his poem, Static. So Qiraan is an information systems student at the University of Cape Town with a passion for people and technology. He is driven by the belief that meaningful impact happens when innovative solutions are designed with human needs at their core. Through his studies and various initiatives, he is developing the skills to bridge the gap between technology and society, creating opportunities that empower individuals and communities. Qiraan is committed to continuous growth, leadership, and using his knowledge to contribute positively to the world around him. Let's give him a very warm round of applause.
Is it working? Oh, it's working. Feels like a TED talk. I feel like I'm gonna change lives. But thank you for everyone being here today. I'll be presenting my poem Static. If I don't see anyone crying, it means it wasn't a good poem. No, I'm just joking. Okay. 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 Get on. Breathe. Breathe. This just static. 20 windows open, and none of it will close. 20 voices, and none of them is mine. Maybe I'm the picture that won't resolve. A dozen versions of myself, not one of them finished. 22, and my memory is already going. Names, dates, whole conversations, gone. And here's what I've never said out loud. The static, it isn't random. It's voices. Every person, every place, every rule, whoever told me who to be. So none of them agreeing, and each one finds something different from me. So when you ask me who I am, understand I have to shout the question over a whole room of people answering it for me. Who am I? One says, be grateful, don't question. This is a test. So I learn to take the crumbs and call them plenty. To feel like I've never quite earned the meal. One says, the world knows what I am before I open my mouth. So I walk into rooms I was never shown on how to enter. Sure on the outside, guessing underneath. One says, men don't crack. Be the rock. Feel nothing. Soft is weak. So I carry it in silence and call it strength. Until someone hugs me, a second too long, and the smallest kindness reaches the exact place they told me to break up. One says, I'm the hope, the one who can't fail. So I became the golden child, a gentle way of saying I'm not allowed to fail when anyone can see. But who am I? Not who they need me to be, not who they're afraid I'll become. Me. Who am I? And then faintly, signal, a voice above the noise. Oh my, I'm so sorry. All my life, your story played behind mine, and I kept muting you. I saw a caretaker. I never saw the woman. You wore long sleeves over wounds. You decided you would never need it. And you absorbed all of it, so none of it would ever reach me. And it didn't. I just never understood that it was a gift. But the dead don't get to hear I say it back. So let me say the rest about the two who still can. Because the truest voices in my head were never the ones telling me who to be. They were the ones I became without noticing. I'm calm in a crisis, but that was never mine. That's my father, raised in a country that decided who he was before he could speak. He didn't argue with it. He outworked it. He never taught me a thing. I just watched. And now the straight back is mine. The quiet hands are mine. That's not my personality. That's him, living in my reflexes. I'm the one who feeds everyone before I sit. But that's not mine either. That's my mother, who carries the whole family's body, so no one else has to carry their own. I never learned it. I absorbed it. It lives in me like a language I never studied, but somehow speak without an accent. So let me say it plainly. I did not struggle the way they did. Even my pain came cushioned. The greatest thing they gave me was a disadvantage I cannot feel, a ceiling I never see, because they spent their whole lives holding it up. And now, in front of so many people, I'm shaken, fragmented, living a dream my family bled quietly to buy me a ticket into. But I am here. And here is a place they only ever got to dream about. And if I'm proof of their dream, then someone is already a proof of mine. Because then there's my brother. And looking at him is like looking in a mirror that hasn't finished forming. They say the firstborn leaves a trail in the blood, and the secondborn is already carrying it. So everything I am, he reflects back before I understand it. Even the wall, the place I learned to break up. And he's watching to decide whether he should build one too. So God, please let me leave him a good signal. The calm, not the static. He's the first proof that someone is being made of me. I am his first draft. So, who am I? After and through all of it, here is the most honest answer I have. I'm a reflection of the world that built me. I'm every voice that ever told me who to be. The religious demands, society's verdicts, masculinity walls, history's weight, all of them in one nervous, sensitive 22-year-old body. Maybe I was never meant to be the single channel. Maybe I'm the room where all of them meet. But I'm still fragmented. I'm still tuning. I'm still asking. But I'm not the noise anymore. I'm the one deciding what to listen to. I'm not self-made anything. I'm made quietly, completely of the ones who love me loud enough to be heard over everything else. And that finally feels like a beginning of an answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful scholars. When he came up here on stage initially, and it looked like he was looking for something, I almost jumped back to ask, can I assist? Little did I know that, in fact, it was part of the poem. Thank you very much. I needed to have started by announcing that this session is actually sponsored by Amazon Web Services, AWS. And you will see that on the conference app, AWS. So that acknowledgement is there as well. During the course of this session, they will also be making presentations. So, like I said earlier, in this session, we are trying to grapple with issues of AI and technology and see how best we can draw on their affordances in order to enhance student success. We are trying to address two main questions. How can technology be leveraged to scale and measure student success? And we are also going to have, as part of the session, presentations that show examples of how AI and technology generally can be used for student success. So we will start with the first keynote from Professor Vukosi Marivate from the University of Pretoria. I'll invite you to come to the stage, Prof. But before he starts, let me introduce him more comprehensively. Prof. Marivate is an associate professor of computer science and holds the ABSA UP Chair of Data Science at the University of Pretoria. He specializes in developing machine learning and artificial intelligence methods to extract insights from data with a particular focus on the intersection of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and natural language processing. His research is dedicated to improving the methods, tools, and availability of data for local or low-resource languages. As the leader of the Data Science for Social Impact Research Group in the Computer Science Department, Prof. Marivate is interested in using data science to solve social challenges. He has worked on projects related to science, to energy, public safety, and utilities, amongst others. Prof. Marivate is a co-founder and CTO of the Lelapa AI, which is an African startup focused on by Africans. He is a chief investigator on the Masakane NLP, which is the National Language Processing Project, which aims to develop national language processing technologies for African languages. He is also a co-founder of the Deep Learning Indaba, the leading grassroots machine learning and artificial intelligence conference on the African continent that aims to empower and support African researchers and practitioners in the field. Welcome, Prof. Marivate.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for this invitation, and I will kick off. Can I see my slides? Okay, thanks for this invitation. It was hard in some ways to prepare for this after I got the brief and also being asked to talk. So I thought on one part is still working on setting up foundations. I know a lot of you work on data and analytics, especially in thinking about students and how students actually succeed. But sometimes setting up the foundations of, okay, now you've got artificial intelligence, you've got generative AI. What does it actually mean in this era? Okay, I'm not getting anything. Okay. That was odd. Okay. So I'm at the University of Pretoria. I think the bio is a bit older, I think 2 years. I'm the director of the African Institute for Data Science and AI at the university and a full professor now of computer science. I sit on the UN's independent scientific panel on artificial intelligence and also almost the equivalent for African Union, which is the Smart Africa African AI Council. I do also engage at the at the Partnership on AI and on the Global Future Council on Data Futures. And this is, yes, multiple hats, and you'll see why in a few minutes. But I work on really building up communities for artificial intelligence across the whole continent. Okay, okay. So on one part, you can define yourself in different ways of being a researcher, an engineer, computer scientist. But what I look at myself as is I'm an African researcher who works on making language infrastructure for everyone. And my personal mission is to make sure that Africans actually have agency during these AI revolutions. That's our lab at the University of Pretoria. That's some of it. There's many more people in this lab at the university. And most of the work that we do is in this intersection of AI and African languages. But then we also do some work in data science and society. So I've worked in the past of analyzing student data. Actually, during my PhD, I spent one summer at an analytics company called Newton that was working on analytics for students, especially through LMSs. So working on their data science team, trying to estimate like chances of success, chances of completion, activities that they were doing in those spaces. Okay, so let's say that data is going to be coming in, but then let's begin with some definitions. So what's AI? AI is, by definition in the textbook, an agent exists in an environment. It takes action to achieve a goal. So the humble South African robot or traffic light sits in a corner. That's the environment. It can go from green, orange to red. That's an action, and it controls traffic, the goal. So that is an AI by definition. Sure, it's the same thing as thinking about a robot vacuum, but the definitions are the same. Now, what's machine learning? It's a subset of AI where you deal with the machine learning patterns from data. So let's think about, for example, supervised learning, where you have almost a teacher who gives you lots of examples of what the input should be and then what the output should look like. So here, let's say you've got lots of images, radiology, x-rays of somebody's chest, and you've got doctors who've then said, this person has this type of ailment. You take that, you put that into the machine, and the machine learning algorithm. You want me to hold it really there? Okay. The machine learning algorithm learns to connect what the images, the pixels are, to what the ailment is going to be. So that's what that supervised training in the middle is. And then what you have is a model that in the future, you give it an image and then it predicts what kind of ailment likely will be there. You can take the same thing as maybe the vitals of the patient instead of an X-ray image. So specific information about the patient, like the heart rate, those types of things, and then also do training. And then the model takes those vitals and then predicts what this could be. So you could have the same thing of here's information about a student and we're trying to predict some other outcome. In computer vision, there's many things you can do. And also in this area, we've had projects, for example, of being able to take satellite images and then identify where baobab trees are. These are protected. So you might have construction happening in an area and then you want to automatically be able to trace these things. So you take a machine, you give it the satellite images with markups of saying, here's where all the baobab trees, it learns how to identify baobab trees. And now you can, every time there's a satellite, new images updated, you scan again and you can identify if a tree has been removed. Right, those are the things that you get. So something that would take inspectors, like if somebody has to drive somewhere to Limpopo, check are the trees on a mining site still there, and that could be then once a year, maybe once every 2 years. If the satellite images are updated every week, you're now checking every week. Right, that is what, and you could also do things like identifying buildings, identifying roads. Why you might want to do this is that what's important in planning, especially in public policy, you need to be able to count populations. So if you see that somebody has made a road, there's new buildings there, even if they're not yet on an official map, you can actually estimate what the population changes are in those types of areas. One of the things in thinking about our students is also like, yes, we had the 4IR kind of thinking about that. And there's also kind of computational thinking. And it demands that we all go through this part of thinking about these emerging technologies that are really augmenting our lives. And this, okay. And in this book, actually for my PhD advisor, he highlights about learning about computing is very important. Like how computers actually solve problems is an important life skill because it gets you right. It's not about writing code, but it's really about learning how a computer can be part of your problem solving. And as such, if you do this, this becomes a skill that if we have in all of society, also enhances, I think, how you would actually interact with AI. I will skip this. You might also have other ways of, instead of doing classification or categorizing, you predict real-world numbers. For example, can you predict what the wind availability is going to be today, how much solar radiation is going to come? That's important because can estimate how much power you're going to have from renewables during the day. You could have, as I said, I was at a company where one of the things we estimated was trying to estimate the probability that a student who's taking a class using the LMS is actually going to finish the class. How you could estimate what their marks are going to be. You can estimate how much time they're actually actively spending on the modules, those types of things. And we've also done things like at the University of predicting pests in a specific area. Now we're going to do a very big jump as I get into the main space here. And then you have these large language models. And right, so I've talked about like machine learning right now, the things that I've talked to you about machine learning, and how then do large language models, how do they come into this case? So really we go back to like 2017. So in 2017, there's this architecture called the transformer architecture that comes out of a couple of researchers at Google. And then what they allow us to do is that we can learn patterns from now textual data about estimating words or like the next word. Like next word prediction. Language modeling goes back to like the 1950s. But then the point is to be able to do it at scale, we needed this architecture and data. So the data can be like as much of scrapes of the internet, Wikipedia, books, all of those things. What you do, the input is a sentence with a word that is missing. The output is the word that is missing. And then you train the machine to now learn how to predict the missing word. And we all know what this is. This is just autocomplete. And why I'm highlighting 2017 to you is that if you had Gmail in 2017, one of the things it started doing is that you start typing a sentence and starts filling it. That's because these models became available. But doesn't look like today's LLM. But it was a language model. And also language models in the 90s, if you had a Nokia phone, it had touch typing where you would put in characters and it would fill in a word. That's the same thing, language modeling. What then happened is that you needed the next piece. The next piece was you've trained that model with all of these sentences, like billions of them. Now you need to then say, okay, but then how does it get to doing this thing where you can ask it questions and then it answers? So that came later. So now you're getting into the 2019s and 2020. That now becomes, oh, you can do question answering. Can we train models to start doing more and more question answering? You give it now, instead of like billions of sentences, maybe you've got hundreds of thousands or millions of examples of a question and an answer pair. And then the machine, what does it do? It lands the pattern from the input to the output, but it wasn't perfect. So I was teaching natural language processing. I could show students that it could finish paragraphs. You could ask some rudimentary questions. It would try to answer it, but they were still not really working out that well. But this was expanding. So that's like we're now 2019, 2020. Then in 2022, what happens is that as the machine started now being able to answer longer questions or answer in longer prose, it became clear that sometimes they would write things that weren't really connected to the question, or they might be offensive, those types of things. So in June 2022, this paper comes out actually from OpenAI that says, hey, you can put in human feedback. So now you've got somebody who asks a question, they get a response, and then they rate if that response is good or not. And you see it even today in LLMs. Some LLMs, as you're using them, they will give you two examples and say, here's two different outputs that could come out. Choose one. Or they'll say, can you give a thumbs up or a thumbs down? But then what happens is that now you might have tens of thousands of these examples. There's literally humans. In this case, at that time, around June 2022, a lot of these jobs were going to places like Kenya, where it's like, you'd have an educated population that speaks English, and people would be trained to say, ask these LLMs questions, you'll get a response, and then you give them almost a mark. And then once you do that, then we learn another pattern of what are the responses that more align with what humans are expecting. And that's the thing that leads us to 30th of November, 2022. What's that? What's that date? ChatGPT comes out. Right, and there's an interesting fact. I remember in June 2022 seeing this and then sending a note to our department and saying, oh, there's changes that are happening here, models, there's something big that's about to happen. Because one, I could, even at those times, I could get some of these LLMs, I could run them on my own laptop and then be able to do code completion in June 2022. The thing that changed is just that now OpenAI releases this to the public. They didn't think it was going to actually be successful. They didn't even know. And then within a couple of hours, so many people started using it that they had to now spend a lot of money increasing their server capacity. It wasn't that they had a big plan. Because as I'm saying, we're going back to 2017, and all we had been doing is, in the research space, adding more and more of better identification. But then there seems to be this thing that then captures kind of the public's imagination, that you have this machine that you can ask a question and it comes out with answers. Right? But there's a challenge. How do you get the people who are going to actually give you information that you can train these machines, especially in our languages? So I'm on sabbatical this year, so my first paper is this paper that goes and says, we've kind of hit a limit of some of this human input, and for many reasons, and that paper goes into it. And this then becomes a challenge when you think about local context, so your students, where they come from, or if their students are trying to learn in their language as well. Right? And then this then gives us an illusion of progress, that there's always these new versions of these models and they're getting better, but then in some ways they're plateaued, they're not changing. And as such, how then do we then work to resolve this? Which, as I said, I'm a sabbatical, that's some of the things I'm thinking about for the year. And we're living now through this age of generative AI. So before, you would think about AI going back to the 1950s, 1960s, maybe somewhere around the 90s, we would just call it machine learning. And then early 2000s, people were talking about neural networks. And then now, over the last few years, we talk about generative learning. What that graph is the amount of papers that are put on arXiv. arXiv is a place in our area of research. Typically, when you write the paper, as soon as you submit it to a conference or journal, you make a version of it available on a preprint server. So you don't wait for the reviews to come back. So if you go back to May 2015, you had about, I think it's 560 papers per month on arXiv. Now I'm pretty sure there are over 9,000 per month. So 300 a day from 20 a day. So 15x growth in 10 years. And the amount of papers that have to do. So I'm trying to show you that AI is not something that comes 3 years ago. It's been an exponential growth for 20 years. Right? Driven that computing has become cheap, data has kind of became cheap to get, and then we could then build these models. For natural language processing, it's the same thing. So natural language processing doesn't necessarily need to be AI, but you have actually a bigger change from 150 papers per month to 3,000. That's a 20x increase in 10 years. Right? And now, also at the same time, we're also making assumptions. And one of these assumptions is that everybody knows about what this AI thing is. This is the Microsoft AI diffusion report that came out a few weeks ago. And South Africa is at 23%. That's people who are 15 to 64 who use generative AI. Only 23% of the country. As estimated, we are number 1 in Africa, but then I think we're number 26 in the world, given 150 countries. Right, and this tracks because the Global Center of AI Governance in Cape Town last year ran a survey where they were asking people if they had heard of the term artificial intelligence, and their number was 30% of South Africa. So we're making also a lot of assumptions here about who might be our students, especially in first year. right, what their actual experiences actually are. And that should really take into, like, us to think twice about how they're also being onboarded into these systems. Right? And the uneven gains of this generative AI revolution. So one, say like language is an issue. Here in February 2023, if you ask ChatGPT, count from 1 to 10 in isiZulu, it would say ku1, ku2, ku3, ku4. Right? Obviously that was wrong. And then here's another one. Kuyabiza, it's translate from isiZulu to English. Kuyabiza kugibela ibanoi. And then says he insults him by calling him a coward was the response. And what that actually means is it's expensive to go on an airplane. Right? This is fixed right now because there's more data, there's been changes and all those things. But just imagine somebody who might interact with the world in Siswati in 2026, they will still have a very bad experience. And this is not even yet saying, oh, if I now explore biology in Chivenda. Right, it gets worse. Sorry. Right, and this is because, like, as with these models have been getting bigger, it's about where does the data come from. So here's a heuristic. Here's Wikipedia. Wikipedia has almost 7 million articles in English. When you go to Swahili, hundreds of millions of people on the African continent, you're at about 100. I think almost 100K. There's Yoruba. There's isiZulu at just over 10,000. So you've gone from 7 million articles written in English Wikipedia, and you only have 11,000 in isiZulu, and then Sesotho is less than 1,000. Right? So for all the challenges that you see with the LLMs in English, just imagine again what the experience is if you're in one of those other smaller languages. And also, what we're evaluating in terms of the abilities of these LLMs. Typically, for the very high resource languages, English, French, German, we might be evaluating how they code, math reasoning, how they do in physics, all those things. But then for the lower resource languages, typically what this shows where there's a dark stripe that goes over, they're mostly evaluated for translation. They're not evaluated for the other. So you're thinking, no, now I can just tell a student, you can now go learn isiZulu about coding. The model might be able to translate in some way English to isiZulu back, but then it will likely be very bad if you're using it for coding because it's not evaluated for that. Only in English is it evaluated for coding. And who also does research in this area of AI? So this is ICLR. ICLR is like the top 3 conferences, places where you actually publish in research in AI. And the red block there are Chinese institutions where the authors are coming from for those papers, 5,000 papers for this year who were accepted. The red block there is China, which is with about 40% of the papers. Blue at the bottom is the US. There's the EU in green and the UK. And Africa would be a small little bit in that corner. Right? Again, means that the context does not come into the systems. Right? But this is also misleading. This is only one way to think about what might be happening at AI conferences. If you then look at actually work on papers that are covering natural language processing, especially African languages, there is a different story to tell. We went from like less than 150 papers, and then we had a huge acceleration where now we're over thousands of papers a year that are covering this. So there's actually been a revolution that's happened over the last 10 years. But it's still not enough. Right? And we then have now, the age of agentic systems, and these are causing more and more of a gap. Right? So one, they evolve, now we generate this text, and now we can also then get tasks to be done, right? And they can act almost like as digital co-workers. But the context is still, they do not understand the context, and you have to really guide them in a way. But then people think you just give them a request, and then they come back. Right, so another paper, book to read, my master supervisor, Chili on closing the gap. Then we need to rethink research and teaching in this age, right? We have these agentic capabilities, they're amazing, but then how then do you keep to our research integrity, our academic integrity during this time? Right? And we must then pivot towards actually critical evaluation and advanced problem framing and actually solving in this. So how do we get to learning to learn? Because that's going to be important. So just saying AI is there and you can learn is not enough. Does the student know how to learn to learn? On how, have they gotten those skills? Right? And as such, it gives us then the opportunity of another thing that unfortunately we have to fill. Right? Sure, AI is transforming what we teach, how we teach, and how we assess, but it will also reinforce gaps. AI is neither good nor bad, but it's an amplifier. The things that are good that you can use AI to improve, make faster, make better, that will happen. At the same time, the things that are bad in the current way that we teach, we assess, are going to be amplified. So the argument that no, LLMs came in and they now remove homework, or homework now is useless because students, it more shows us that the way we assess was originally bad. We just thought that it was enough friction that students had to learn so that they can resolve our assessment. And what the LLMs did is they just showed that no, you're not actually, there is ways to actually sidestep this friction. So we need to think about how we're going to teach and how we're going to assess in this environment. I am telling you right now, there will be a day that this type of AI, the generative AI, is boring. And we would have changed our assessment. It's not going away. So the point is to think in that way instead of just being reactionary. Of what then in our assessment has to change to fundamentally get us back to what we're trying to do in teaching and learning. We must, there might be co-pilots and co-tutors now. We might have new flipped classrooms, and then there are possibilities to personalize learning. I can tell you right now, it's hard. As I said, I worked at a company that tried to do that, and even today, just saying we're going to have personalized education because we have generative AI is not enough. You need to work at it. We need to move from memorizations to process and creativity, reflective learning, feedback, and diagnostics, and how do we assess thinking in an AI-rich environment? Remember, our children now in learner are growing up with these. You're in WhatsApp and you can ask an LLM questions. Right? So that learning how to learn, it's too enticing to just use AI. And then we have a shifting definition of what is a future-ready workforce. There's bias and blind spots in these models. There's lack of local data, meaning there's lack of local relevance. You can try, with some of these models, try to create teaching materials. And if you just give it very basic prompts, you will see how they actually then show who's building them, because the examples that they use will be completely disconnected from the reality of who our students are. Right? And then there's unequal access. Remember, I showed the two things. I said that the diffusion report is saying only 23%. So it's almost now. I used to think there should be a basic computational thinking class in in basic education. And then there must probably be a data science 101 for every staff member and student in higher education when they start. But now it seems also going through AI and generative AI basics will probably be needed. There's issues with policy and standards, so that's why I'm also on the UN panel. Unclear rules about privacy, model use, and student data. And then institutions need to kind of lead with intentional strategies on how to deal with this. The bigger risks that I think AI can limit imagination, as a lot of it still shows global north thinking. It uses this concept of weird, westernized, educated, what's the other one? Industrialized, rich, and democratic countries. Right. It doesn't represent everyone. There's a paper we're working on now looking at the philosophies behind LLMs. What do they actually represent? Systems must reflect local languages, cultures, and futures. And then our researchers and students must be co-creators, not just users. It is not just, oh, we'll just use the latest one. It solves the problem. You will see that you will keep on chasing a horizon that never comes. Critical thinking and transdisciplinary work and research will become major. How many of your learners have a great fit for working in these spaces so that they can improve? And then where's that governance capacity? I wanted to highlight this before I close off, even though I don't have a lot of time. I read this book over the last month or so, and I think it's a great book to read. And in this book, and I'm Not a Robot by Joanna Stern, she spends a year living her whole life with AI, lots of different other things, but she comes up with these 6 rules, and you can come up with yours as well. So 1, I will work with the AI, I will not work for it. All right, very important distinction. I will not fall in love with a bot. You should read the book to understand why. And I must think about who is watching. Where's the data that you're inputting into these systems going? And what is it going to be used for? I will raise humans and not robots. The students and the learners that we're trying to serve should not themselves become robots. We should be continuing and saying, what is their humanity and what do we bring out of their humanity? And then I will keep building my own training data, meaning choose your own paths, not paths that are told to you by a technology or a machine, so that you have your own data. Right? And highlighting these, maybe it's one of the good places. Can you think of a rule for yourself in this age of generative AI? All right, and this is something we've done now with our lab as well. We have 8 rules. Right, so just reflect on that. We work on this natural language processing. We create data. We build models. We work on governance. We do code switching. We created a data set last year of 3,000 hours of speech for 7 South African languages. So now you can have speech recognition for Chivenda, isiNdebele, languages that were not covered before in these areas. We do that type of work. We augment data, and we release these tools, as much of them openly. We've done things like bringing together terminology lists and glossaries in many, many languages. We deal with code switching as well. We build LLMs, and then we also do community practice on building these language tools as well. So I'll skip that because I think I've said some of this. And we've also worked on continental organizations to actually deal with this. One being Masakane, which I co-founded in 2019, that then builds natural language processing for Africans. And it led to a huge amount of research in this area. And I will skip. Yeah, so where I will argue that some of the features that you might have in your language that didn't exist before Masakane are now probably there, that you see them even in other global companies, because there's now community across the continent, 3,000 plus researchers who work on these languages. And then we also started the Deep Learning Indaba in 2017. It's the largest AI research conference and gathering on the continent. And where in 2017 we were saying we started this so that Africans can become critical contributors, owners, and shapers of the coming advances in AI, because we saw this horizon coming. It's now, we also have Indaba Access. These are smaller conferences. This year's one is happening at UKZN, I think on the 5th of July, starting on that day. But then in 2024, 2025, we had them, I think, in 50 out of 55 African countries. So almost every week there's an Indaba X happening somewhere on the continent. And last year we were in Kigali for the main Indaba, 1,200 participants, and that's what African AI looks like. Right, we had all over people coming in, and this year we're in Pan Atlantic University in Nigeria. As I said, I'm director of a new institute at UP called the Institute for Data Science and AI, and this is really to say how do we capacitate and build more in this area. I'll skip. And we are building our own Pan-African LLM this year called Africa LLM, and at the moment we are at the we're doing some of that question answering, fine tuning data. So if you want to join, there is a QR code there if you want to join that project. So I think I'll stop there. So thank you. So if you, yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. That's very rich. But before I release you, you might want to entertain one or two questions from the floor. Any questions? I think we have about 9 or so minutes for questions. There's one there. And another one. So let's have those two from that end.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's Matlore from SMU. And I would like to say that thank you for the great presentation, Prof. It was very rich indeed and quite insightful. But I have a concern regarding the LLMs that you were talking about. So given that the LLM, they learn from a large data set and the human feedback. And I want to know, how can we ensure that the bias presented in data sets and evaluators are not reinforced in that model? Okay. And also just to further elaborate, there's a part where you mention about the governance and the policies that they are not accurate standards. So what do you think the policy that guides the AI can include? Thank you.
And then was the second question? We can just do it now.
We can hear a second question from the same end.
Oh, third one. Yeah, that's fine. Is it?
Thank you, Prof. Kulego from UNISA. I'm extremely excited about that Africa LLM. And I don't know where Max is sitting, but is the aim to eventually have Africa LLM incorporated into the list of available models that we're able to select on AWS solutions, Microsoft, and your other tech giants? Is that the end goal? Thanks.
Another question, yeah.
Shavandre Low from Nelson Mandela University. So in your professorial lecture, you mentioned low resource languages. And you mentioned Ngugi, which I love, and Fano as well, that speaks about how we commit low-level languages to the grave, right? So I want to ask you in this space, how can universities encourage multilingualism and use the LMS to generate data that you can use to build LLMs? How can they do that?
Sure. Okay, I'll try and answer that in 90 seconds so that we can open up maybe for questions from this side as well. Governance is important, and some of it, some people say like, not some people, like there's views of don't really worry about what's in the LLM, but then worry about what comes out. And that's one model of governance, of saying there must be things that are protected. What you would have seen is that at the beginning, so with some of the LLMs, you could ask a lot of questions about medical things. And now they're starting to say, no, I can't answer that. Please go see a doctor. Well, that is not driven by South African law. It's driven by US interventions because they've had people who have either passed away or have had very adverse effects because of what. So the question is now, how then do we look at governance ourselves? I'll give an example when it comes to students. There's been a big push to say, can we use LLMs for student tutors or for student counseling? And I hope I disabuse you of that notion from today's talk. You must test them thoroughly. You cannot just say, we are now going to have a tutor for biology available just because, oh, that's what the LLM is there and it's working. If you have not tested it for your context, if you have not tested it for guardrails, so what is the things that we don't want it to handle, just saying we're letting it loose could be extremely dangerous. And yes, for mental health and the challenges that students are going through, we want them to have more and more mental health services. But people are just thinking we are just going to say AI therapist and that's enough. It should have been tested. It should have gone through, and it's in a way, it should be treated like a medical device that goes through all the governance processes in the country for medical devices. Right? And at the moment, that's a loophole. People just say, no, we can just release. We do hope that these LLMs do make it onto Pond. They're all open weight. There's another LLM called Afrique LLM that comes out of Miller. I think they just updated a few days ago. They used to handle 20 African languages. Now it does 50. And then we were aiming for 40 for this year as version 1. These are all, they will be open weight models as well. So yeah, people can use them. Even now we've got speech systems. We've got lots of other data. Those models are open and available. Then on the question, please, universities, you do have now kind of these language development plans that have gone on. You can create resources. One of the things we did was on this, like almost all the universities at one point in time had to create multilingual glossaries, but they're very hard to actually use. There's sometimes in PDFs, sometimes in very archaic little software tools. Those tools get deprecated and they get removed from the internet and those resources disappear. Why aren't you using the library? Why aren't you using in very simple formats like CSV that make them interchangeable? Why aren't you using licenses that encourage reuse? If you just put a PDF online, it doesn't mean it's open source. It's actually closed. Because it means that we will first assume that it uses the most closed copyright. You must then say, here's the thing, it's on the library, and the license is under this, right? I might say, why not use a CC BY SA? Creative Commons attribution, you must attribute where it comes from, and share alike. People who use this and create something, they must then also release their data under the same license. Okay, maybe, I don't know, one or two more questions. I think, yeah.
Just one more question.
I'm just going to go through.
Yes.
Okay, my question is around the ethics around the use of AI that is currently be blindly thrown around students, AI checkers and stuff. I wish to have clarity on that, considering that you've showed us the Eurocentric nature of the domineering innovation that comes with AI. And we're still trying to contextualize. Suddenly there are police outside the door and my students are like, say, it's like, this is my work. I just happen to have put proper English. And I'm like, okay, we worked so hard to learn the English and now we are being policed for learning that English. So there is that back and forth that end up having me. And I see the academic stuff seems to be misguided around this because I fight with them a lot on this because it's just terrorizing students when they need to complete.
Sure.
So how can you guide that? Not only for us here, because there are leaders of institutions who probably have that going. I do want us potentially, if it's not yet developed, something to follow. What would be potentially the blueprint safe enough to follow? Thank you.
Sure. I'll answer that one. When I came back into the academy, the bane of my existence was Turnitin. It does not represent what people think it means. It is not a plagiarism checker. And it's used for that, to the point that it's sitting inside your policies. That says that if your Turnitin score is over X, it doesn't mean any of that. It's contextual. You have to sit, read what your assessment was trying to do. You read where there might have been flags about semantic similarity, and then you sit with the student. And you say, can you go through what was going on here? What, again, AI did is it showed completely this farce. That you were not evaluating that. We were not actually going and sitting with the student. We just saw a number and we just said, if you were over this, so because what would the students do? They would go into paraphrase machines so that they could just get their score. Did they learn? Likely not. And now the AI ones are worse. My job as a researcher, I work in natural language processing, is to create a system that either can read or process natural language or create natural language. If somebody else is building a system that is saying it's going to identify if it's generated by AI, we are on two sides of the same thing. I'm trying to create things that look more and more like human, and they're trying to identify if it is actually a machine. One way or another, that's going to lead to catastrophic failure on the side of trying to identify if it's a machine, because it will either always say everything is an AI or everything is a human. There is no way it's going to catch it. So I will disabuse you. Please do not use AI checkers. Switch them off. Figure out the process. Figure out the process of how do we go in and teach academic integrity in the age that AI is there. It's not going to go away. Switch them off. If they are completely misleading, they will lead either to catastrophic false positives or catastrophic false negatives. If you use them just because the machine told me so, and as such, because we switch off, the machine told me. You're wrong. There's no thinking that we're doing as teachers.
Thank you very much, Prof. I know there could be many more questions to ask, but I think you can interact with Prof later. Please join me in thanking Prof Marivate for the wonderful presentation. Thank you.
No, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Oh, let me get more water.
I'll invite Ashton, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to invite to the stage now Thembelani Chili, who will present their poem, I'm a Child of Unfinished Dreams. And sorry, I see I've just lost your biography. Mm-mm. Sorry, if you wouldn't mind just, yeah, I can't find your biography at the moment, sorry. But please. I'll do your biography after your poem. Do you want it?
Greetings, everyone. Yes, thanks to Bafana for winning, because if they lost, I wasn't gonna do this poem. Kwasuka-sukela. Ucose ekuqaleni, impilo esiphilayo iyiphupho injengenganekwane. I am a child of unfinished dreams. Not broken, not lost, just unfinished. Because some dreams don't die. They move. They travel through silence and sacrifice. Through generations that never learned how to name them. I was born before I knew I was a dream. Before my foot could walk, there were footsteps walking for me. Before my voice could speak, there were prayers speaking my name. I come from a home where love wore the face of discipline. Where no was not rejection, but protection. I spent many years thinking my parents had taught me how to remain small. Little did I know they were teaching me how to grow strong enough to stand in a world much bigger than my village, KwaNgqolosi. My father, he carried a dream he was never allowed to touch. They told him, A boy belongs with kettles, not classrooms. So he folded his dreams like old letters kept safely in his pocket. But some dreams refuse to die. They travel through the blood. He never handed me money to inherit, but instead, he handed me a question. What life will you create from what I could not become? My mother, uMapheo, Ntombi kaBaba, she taught me the value of small things. A bead. Nothing extraordinary on its own, but with patience, time, and pain, a beautiful necklace appears. Life has small victories, failures, prayers, opportunity, which comes a beat by beat, by beat, by beat, by beat. I never walked this journey alone. My brother and my 3 sisters were the music of my home. We were not raised to compete against each other, but raised to be the wind against each other's wings. And that was one of my first lessons of leadership. A mountain top is beautiful to reach, but it is more meaningful when you leave a path for others to climb. I never dreamed about university. That dream had no face, no name, no destination. I grew up going to school because children go to school. Until one day, a small top 10 certificate rested in my hand. You may think this is small, but it can take you far, my teacher said. Then life changed its geography. An envelope arrived mentioning a different province, different world. For who? For me. A dream I had never been brave enough to pronounce. From a distance, a dream can be wonderful, but up close, they can be frightening. I arrived at university carrying a suitcase, but the heaviest thing I carried was the fear of being discovered. Discovered as the boy whose English was not perfect, the boy who comes from a rural school, a boy who did not know how this new world would work for him. Yeah, I laughed when everyone laughed, not because I understood, but through loneliness, you sometimes wear the mask of belonging. Dreams do not remove storms. They teach you how to dance in the rain. There were marks that humbled me, failures that questioned me, making me question if that envelope was truly delivered to the right person. Then my own name called me back. Thembelani Chili. Hope upon God. When I lost faith in myself, I borrowed the faith hidden inside my own name. I then remembered I came here to learn, unlearn, relearn. To learn that failure is not my identity. To unlearn the fear of my own potential. To relearn that becoming is a process. And somehow, my voice found me while I was helping others find theirs. A classroom of young children. Tiny hands holding books, small voices sounding like letters, A, E, I, O, U. They thought I was teaching them how to read. Little did they know they were teaching me how to speak. The boy searching for belonging became someone who created belonging. Since then, I have achieved many accolades I could mention, but those are not the greatest chapters of my story. It's those moments where someone said, when I lost my way, my voice. You reminded me that I belong, that I could rise and find my own place. But dreams are strange. When you finally touch one, it doesn't say you have arrived. It whispers, look further. Yesterday's dream became today's reality. Today's reality is already preparing me for a life yet to arrive. One dream fulfilled does not close the book. It just turns the page. And the story continues. And here's the famous question. Who am I? I am my father's bridge to a place he could not reach. I am my mother's bead threaded to the different kind of a necklace. I am the child who entered a room feeling small, becoming a man who ensures others do not shrink. I am the dream. My younger self did not know how to dream. And I am just the road my family began walking before I was born. I was never meant to be the end of the story. I am just a dream that keeps dreaming. Vukosi Siyaphumelela.
Thanks. Thanks. So now let me do the short biography. So Thembelani Chili is a PhD candidate and an advocate for student success at Rhodes University. Hailing from the rural community of KwaNgqolosi in KwaZulu-Natal, he recently completed a Master of Commerce and Financial Markets with distinction. His journey of leadership and service began through community engagement. This foundation has shaped his leadership journey, including serving as SRC Postgraduate Affairs Counselor and Vice President, where he championed student well-being and effective governance. He is a two-time recipient of both the Dr. Rev Simon Ngqobushle Student Leadership Award and the Rhodes University Alan Gray Top 100 Award. He currently serves as a peer advisor, mentor, and a member of Ascend at RU. Dedicated to creating opportunity for students to thrive. His journey reflects resilience, humility, and a passion for transforming lives through education and leadership. Thank you, Thembelani.
Thank you, Thembelani. We are proud to have such thriving scholars. As I mentioned earlier, we are now going to have inputs that show examples of how technology, including AI, is used to enhance student success. And our first speaker will be Professor Francois Strydom from the University of the Free State. Let me introduce him more properly as he comes up. I know we all, or almost all of us know him, but I'm going to introduce him nonetheless. Prof. Strydom is currently the Senior Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of the Free State. He has dedicated his career to promoting quality, equity, and student success in higher education through evidence-based innovation. Since 2007, he has been the project leader of the South African Surveys of Student Engagement, commonly known as SASE, which has been administered in 20 public higher education institutions across South Africa. Prof. Strydom's professional and research interests include student engagement, success and quality, capacity development, quality learning, and teaching and evidence-based change in higher education, as well as employability. Over to you, Prof. Strydom.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to speak after two such wonderful leaders as Prof. Marivate, who I've heard a lot about, and he definitely did not disappoint. And then, how do I follow a poem like that? Right, so I tend to have to cry at every Siyaphumelela. I'm known for it, so excuse me if I do. I'm the chosen spokesperson from the Center for Teaching and Learning. I drew the shortest stick. If you want to know about student success, you talk to Gugu Kanye. And if you want to know about how to integrate AI into teaching and learning, you talk to Tiana van der Merwe, that I have the privilege of working with. So let's see. Well done, team. You're on it with the slides. Well done. And it works. Even better. Right. Okay. I'm going to share some perspectives in 3 areas. AI governance, how we capacitate our staff and how we capacitate our students. We are learning. And if you listen to Prof. Marivate, that's about as good as it gets with how fast AI is moving. And that's the stance that the University of the Free State has taken. So let's talk about how we deal with governance. The University of the Free State took a position of not creating a policy, but rather a position statement, which you can find on our website. And the reason for that is because we saw that AI was so complex and the massively unprecedented speed at which it grows. We will, however, in the next less than a month, approve guidelines for teaching and learning and research. In our assessment stance, we have adopted the AI assessment scale, which has these 5 levels. It's by Perkins et al., where lecturers are capacitated to think about what they are assessing. If you want to assess memorization, which is still very important for critical thinking, you will do what centuries of students have done. You will have a supervised exam in a large hall. But if you want to teach critical analysis in an AI age, you might go for full AI integration, where your students have to critique the outputs of different AIs. Our AI detectors were switched off. We're just following UCT for exactly the reasons that our colleague stated. The inaccuracy in general, that it's been reported as being twice as likely to flag 2nd, 3rd, and 4th language speakers of English, and that is 93% of our students. And we cannot call somebody dishonest because of what it does to their psychology and their future. So we are not using them. We are changing how we assess. Our strategic focus has shifted towards innovative learning design and the assessment of the learning process, and an enhanced focus on scaled cultural integrity development, or a culture of integrity that we want to develop at scale. Right. Now, what do we do for staff? Because as much as we love students, and you heard from my CV that I've been, before most of our students were born, advocating for students and their voices in institutional design. What is our multi-pronged approach for staff? Staff is absolutely essential because students are supposed to be transient. Some of them become our staff, but our role in society is to create new leaders, is to capacitate, right? But we have to take our staff along. So in 2023, we started with our first AI assessment workshop. 2024 to 2026 We helped our staff to think differently about how you use different digital platforms like Panopto, Feedback, Fruits, and how you think about authentic and learning process assessment. Our annual teaching and learning conferences have had multiple keynotes on AI. I'm so glad I met another keynote today, and maybe 2 or 3. You'll be getting emails from us. And then we had Mike Perkins earlier this year coming to share the AI assessment scale to help guide academics around how do we think through this pedagogically. We had institutional workshops, a national workshop where we collaborated with UCT. At a module or course level, AI and how you integrate it into module or course level is integrated in the curriculum renewal program. And our new LMS does have LMS capability, but that capability is sandboxed and will not be released. And I'm so glad that we were, as an audience, disimbued about the notion, no, we can save on human tutors, let's just use AI. Right? As if you listen to that poem, you can ever replace one human valuing another's development. Our AI community of practice is our strongest community of practice in the 20 years that I've been at the university. We have regular presentations by national leaders. We had MIT presenting on My Brain on ChatGPT about a month ago, where they shared the newest research with us. What do we do for our students at scale? So that's what we do for our staff, our students at scale. So we developed a digital skills and competency pathway. This was a project in collaboration with the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. It's one of the few multi-year digital skills pathways. You can see we were cited in the very influential EduCourse Horizon Report in 2025. As you can see, AI literacy is at the bottom. Why is it there? You can't develop a culture of literacy, AI and responsible use of AI if you don't train people like we were trained by Prof. Marivate about what AI is. What it is and what it isn't, what it can and cannot do for you. So we do that intentionally at scale. All first years do level 1. In FYS, the first year seminar, in that course, I personally teach students about the cognitive consequences of abuse of AI, given the newest research and what deficits that can result in if you don't think carefully about that wonderful title of the book, Why You're Not a Robot. Right? The last comment I will make is on how AI is changing and has changed how we support students. And this is under the wonderful leadership of Gugu and her team. We have a chatbot. Now you can see the 2024 stats for Jan to March, the number of interactions we had on the chatbot. Now, when we started out with a bot, we were one of the first universities in 2020 to introduce it. I don't know, Gugu, did we start with what, like 300 questions or something? Where are you? Oh no, we can't sit that far, then we can't get inputs from you, right? So we started with a set of questions, but it exploded, the use, right? And you can see if you just compare from one year to the next, it's a doubling of the use. That doubling is partly because we have integrated AI. What does that mean? We give our yearbooks to the AI, so the AI has a script and a context from which it works. We know that for our first-gen students, who are 8 out of 10 of our students, they love talking and asking a bot these questions because, as the student indicated, I don't want to be found out. If you're first gen, you can ask over and over, what is a dean? What is it? What was my AP score again? And you can ask that all the time. Average number of interactions, 49 interactions that students have. And then if you go, the wonderful power of this technology, we analyzed 40% of the students that were using it were prospective students. So it is students in under-resourced schools that don't have, or where we don't reach in terms of marketing. They can ask anytime, day or night, ask questions about what can I study at the UFS, what does it offer, over and over and over again. So wonderful capacity, but as it was indicated to us, carefully tested, carefully controlled. And colleagues, that is where we are in our journey, how the University of the Free State is going to help to position its students and its staff based on the wonderful assets that they have as human beings, and how they can leverage this technology to enhance those wonderful qualities, but also we hope if the infrastructure, and there I'm very glad that AWS is with us. I'll make one comment. Some of our economics colleagues at UCT, one of the professors indicated last year that if they compare our internet access to countries on a similar development trajectory like Colombia, our internet is 4 times more expensive. We have to win that fight. We have to get the digital divide narrower, or otherwise the exclusion, the small block of African publications, the development of African languages will continue to be that small. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Once again, any questions from the floor? Questions, comments? I don't seem to see any hand up. Prof, you are lucky.
I am lucky.
Just before you go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next input is from Amazon Web Services, Max Makgoale.
Thank you very much, Program Director. It's a real honor to be in this room today, and for the past 2 days. I've attended as many of the sessions as I possibly could and listened with glee about how much the institutions that I claim to have been working with over the past 6 years have done. And I want to give you all a round of applause, if I may, just for the work that you've already done in moving forward this agenda of student success. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about what we do as AWS. But before I do that, I just want to maybe just highlight a few of the things that I've picked up in the last couple of days that I've learned. First of all, I know that the challenge around student success is actually quite a dire one. It actually makes me sad to listen to some of the statistics that you hear about throughput, first-year failures, and all of those things, because some of those are kids that grew up in my community. And many of them are kids that went to school with my children. So I understand it, and I feel the problem, and I'm glad that there's such a corpus of strong minds challenging the issue and working at it. And I'm actually quite proud and honored that Said and Siyaphumelela have asked us to participate in this. That being said, however, I want to just maybe share a little bit about what we do as AWS in this game. So our mission around education as AWS is captured on the screen here. So we want to accelerate digital transformation in partnership with the full community of education, including learners, educators, researchers, technology providers. And I think we've done quite a bit of that work so far, but I realize that we're just beginning. And to talk a little bit about what we've done, where we come from as AWS, we've been around for 20 years. We've built 39 regions, and a region is actually quite a significant investment. If you want to know what a region means, you can talk to me about that. We have one region in Cape Town, which answers the question around data residency, sovereignty and the likes for many of us who actually have questions about where my data is going, etc. AWS has made significant investments in South Africa. And I have one question. Is there anybody in the room? In fact, raise your hand if you know where AWS started. Raise your hand if you know that AWS started in South Africa. AWS was started in the city of Cape Town. And some of the things I'm going to show you here will actually speak to parts of that. So when you look at our competitors and our peers in the market, you'll be shocked to find out about the types of investments that we've made in this economy in South Africa. 5.6 billion rand that has been spent in South Africa. Our impact being close to 12 billion in the South African GDP since 2018. 68 billion projected additional GDP contribution by 2029. And I see all of that in South Africa. And I think for me, the one metric that speaks to this kind of contribution is that we've got 5,700 full-time or equivalent jobs in South Africa already. I think that's bigger than any of our peers in this industry. So let's talk a little bit about the agentic AI. So our CEO, Matt Garman, speaks about agentic AI as kind of like a growth and an evolution from where we were in the past 3 years being generative AI. He speaks of it as something that is going to be such a tectonic shift that in the next few years, there's going to be billions of AI agents that are working side by side with humans to improve productivity and do autonomous work and semi-autonomous work, working close to us and helping us to achieve productivity that we've never thought possible before. And in higher education, we see that happening in the teaching learning environment, in operations, helping researchers to achieve faster time to science, with some caveats, obviously, that thinking must be done. And I believe what Prof. Marivate was speaking about there. These are tools that we should be using, but we have to be using them if we're going to achieve the productivity that we hope to get to. So what are agents, AI agents? They are, as I mentioned, it's autonomous and semi-autonomous software systems that can reason, plan, and act to achieve a particular goal. And different to what we've known as a generative AI, we know to be doing things like content generation. But a generative AI agent, if I can call it that, is something that is fairly limited in what it can do. And it'll wait for you to prompt it again for it to do anything else. Agentic AI, however, is something that you can give a goal to, and it'll pursue that goal. You can give it access to tools like your email systems, like your data, your systems that are, that you're using in your organization. And it'll operate with much less human supervision that we're used to with generative AI. So we're moving from one on the left-hand side where you need much more human oversight, if you look at my slide there, and on the right-hand side with agentic systems where much less human oversight is required. Now, I know that the fear that most of us are saying is that these things will actually begin to take over our jobs, but that's not quite the truth. And I think we need to start thinking about it differently. And as leaders in organizations, we need to think about it and say, if you had an unlimited purse and you could have unlimited resources, what would you do with that? If you could tomorrow, in your particular division, employ another 100 people, what would you do with that capacity? And these are the opportunities that AI agents provide. Where on the one side, you've got the value that you can get, and how do you think about the competitive advantage that these tools could give you? And I know that we're educators, but I think there's also a little bit of competition for students amongst us and globally. I know that it's quite easy for a student that's sitting right here in Diepsloot to register for a course and complete it with a university that's overseas and do it online. So I think that competitive advantage is something that we need to take seriously too. So at AWS, we provide you everything that you need to build these types of solutions. So from the tools, the models, and speaking about models, we have our own models. We do have the Nova family of models, but we give you access to more than 120 different types of models that you can choose for whichever purpose that you might need to use. So for example, if you want to do chatbot type solutions, you could use a much cheaper model, which is going to be able to handle things like the million conversations that Prof. Strydom was talking about at a much cheaper cost. However, if you want to be doing things like deep reasoning, you could choose a much more expensive model like Claude Opus or whatever it is that you choose. So we give you choice as AWS. And the nice thing about it as well is that you don't need to commit for a long period of time. You could switch it on today, switch it off tomorrow. And I think that's the flexibility that you need when you're making decisions about how to take this thing forward. We've got the infrastructure, we've got the expertise to guide you and to help you implement these solutions that you might be thinking about. And we've also got the security and guardrails. And I think this is an important piece as well that one needs to think about, because soon, in fact, we know that bad actors in the cyber world are starting to use these agents to do terrible things. And in South Africa, in AWS, we give you an environment where, one, we can make sure that the AI that you implement is focused mainly just on your technology and on your learning. So you would root it in whatever documentation that you need. This thing is not going to hallucinate and pick up information out of the wild, wild web and give you the right answers. This thing stopped. So we've got a full portfolio that helps you build that up. And I must say that we do this with a lot of partners where we give them the tools, we give our customers the tools. We've got a nice, huge box of Lego that we give you to be able to build whatever you need out of that. And in our mission, we like to say that we want to have the student at the center. And I was actually quite happy to see that come up in a lot of the presentations that I listened to in our presentation. So we have touch points, and I've got case studies where we're doing that across the country in every single area where we do touch the full cycle of the student journey. Examples of that would be the application system that students interact with when they're applying for NSFAS funding is hosted on the AWS platform. If you're using Blackboard, which the majority of universities in this room are, that runs on AWS. If you're using D2L, which I know UFS is going to, as mentioned by Prof. Strydom just now, is also running on AWS. The Moodle community is starting to believe also that AWS is the best place to run Moodle. We've just migrated the largest of the Moodle instances on the African continent, which is UNISA, and arguably also on the Southern Hemisphere. And we've got quite a number of these tools that touch students throughout the entire journey. So I've got plenty of examples, but you know, and I will share them with you. So and I want to call out maybe just a few of these examples that are there. Instructure, who provide the Canvas system, and I know there's not too many universities using them now, but they're building a lot of what they call agentic AI. They call it Ignite AI on our system. And they've got a pretty nice quote that they mention where they say, the AI agent never acts on its own. It's always taking directions from a human or teacher, from an instructional assistant in that way. University of Johannesburg, I think they were one of the first they run their Moodle system also on AWS. But what's nice about the case study that they had was they actually built a chatbot that they chose to expose to students in the place where you actually find them. And I was curious when I asked a few students that came to speak to me in the past 2 days, they say at night, the last thing that they do is check their WhatsApp. The first thing that they do the following morning is check their WhatsApp. So I think it's the right strategy. And Google mentioned yesterday that she's doing that. You're meeting them right where they are. And to do things like the interventions that are required, post finding the student and you know, categorizing them as a student at risk, that's probably a good place to begin. And we've got some international universities, obviously, quite a large list. And I picked just this one, ASU, what they've done is they actually created an AI cloud innovation center that they're building on the AWS platform. And they're doing that, obviously, to advance everything that they do, research, teaching and learning, and the operations of the university, and quite a few innovative things that they're doing in various fields of science. I'm going to pause there and pass on to my colleagues to carry on. Thank you very much.
Lefty Lucy. Righty tighty. Okay, got it. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you so much. My name is Leanri Van Heerden. I am from the Central University of Technology on the Bloemfontein campus. I am from e-learning and educational technology, and we sit within the Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching. And I'm just very briefly going to share with you the recent experience we had re-looking at our data warehouse and the journey we had with the team from Edge Analytics. So I'm going to go back to COVID, and I know everyone is really tired of this, but trust me, there's a little bit of method here. This was the first time I had my enlightenment moment when it comes to data and the importance of it. So one morning I was standing in my kitchen trying to figure out what half of the appliances in there actually does, trying to bake bread. Why were we all baking bread in the beginning of COVID? When I got a call from one of our lecturers in radiography, saying that she just had the most disturbing conversation with a student. The student was at home and she got in touch with the lecturer saying that these new discussions that the lecturer has brought up onto the LMS are very interesting and she loves it, but she won't be able to always contribute because she has to walk from her home, her family home, to the main farmhouse to plug in her phone to charge because she doesn't have electricity in her family home where she lives. And I was standing there, trying to figure out what the starter dough is doing. And there's a student who doesn't have electricity continuously enough to charge her mobile device, this little brick that she's doing her entire studies on. So I put out some feelers and I spoke to the other lecturers and I, did a little bit of a brief analysis. and 238 students came forward with the same problem. 238 students did not have access to charge their devices consistently. So we sent out solar chargers, we sent out power banks, and it was just such an eye-opener to realize that we don't know our students. We don't know our students. We don't know anything about them apart from the data that we have, their student numbers, maybe a little bit of background on where they went to school, where they're from, and so on. But we really don't know their needs and what they struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So that's really where my first experience came with realizing that we really need to fill in this data gap of our student. So while during COVID we were, putting on a Band-Aid on a knife wound, we didn't realize that there was an internal bleeding problem that was actually fatal to our students. And we had to get into it, and we realized we don't actually have the data. The data is all there, but it's in the LMS, it's in the SIS, it's in this place, it's in that place. This person is the custodian of that data. That person is the custodian of that data. Nothing speaks together, nothing is in the same place. And we realized we had a really, really big problem. Okay, so a couple of years after that, by the time I've had all my COVID memories repressed deeply enough so that only the psychologist could get to them, I had one of those opportunities where I was lucky enough to stand next to the right person at the right time. So Mrs. Nathalie Morolong, who is from our registers division, her and I were waiting for some coffee or some milk or something, and we started chatting, and we realized that she has just been made the project lead for the registrar's newly mandated data strategy, and I have just joined Siyaphumelela with the rest of my SIL team. And we realized that we had the practical, applicability. We needed the technology and the expertise which she had with the Edge Analytics team, and together, like the Power Rangers, we could do something very special. So the team from Edge Analytics came in and they broke it down into each of the divisions, then broke it down further into each of the units. They sat down with everyone, determined the needs, made sure that everything that they applied and everything that they suggested were fit for purpose. Very patiently, I might add, they dealt with us. And they realized that we needed to firstly break down this data silos and create a data lake or a data warehouse, a single source of truth, where all of our data is available to everyone who needs to have the data. We also needed to empower everyone who has, then access to the data. I mean, now you have the data, but what do you do with it? Who are the experts? Who can analyze? Who can interpret? Who is able to, write up the indicators that determine which, data points are flagged and things like that. So whole long journey that they sat with us. Tonderai is going to show you some of the dashboards that we ended up with. And let's move on. So when they sat down with a SILT unit finally, so in the SILT unit, we have e-learning, we have student academic development support, we have curriculum, we have disability unit, very similar to every other university SILT or CTL. And we realized that the biggest questions that were driving us is who are students that are dropping out or being delayed? We don't know who they are until it is too late. What are the factors that the indicators that contribute to them being at risk? Which of the courses and the programs and the faculties are the highest risk? Are there these trends and implications that we can look at? What kind of interventions are actually working and which ones are we just throwing into the wind? It kind of makes me think of, I've been watching a lot of precision farming documentaries lately, so sorry about this tangent. But we were basically that old farm that was just weeding all of the crops, whether it needed it or not, because we didn't have the technology to do it otherwise. And we were fertilizing all of the soil, whether it needed it or not, and just hoping that the yield is going to increase by just throwing all of our interventions into the air, and maybe one or two students are going to stick. And really what was happening is we were wasting all of our resources. We had a small team in the first place and we were wasting them. We weren't really precision farming our students. And we knew that by having a real data warehouse or a lake where that source of truth is unified and we know that all of the analytics that come from that is accurate, it's real time, we can give not just us, but our lecturers and our students the best possible chance at success. What the Edge Analytics team brought to us is that these are the three behavioral factors that will hopefully help us to success. And it's obviously the student profile, the indicators, so the risk indicators or the behavioral indicators, and then of course, and only lastly, the academic results, which used to be kind of the forefront runner of your indicators for if a student is doing well or not, whereas now that's kind of taken the back seat. And then the value that this adds us, of course, we know that this is going to enhance teaching and learning and our practices. It's also going to help our lecturers become more reflexive and become more in tune with their students, not just as a student number on an Excel spreadsheet, but as a person in their class who they are the custodians of and who they should be taking care of. We now have real-time dashboards that we can access at any time. We can spread them out. We can make them available to certain groups and things depending on our AD, so that those who need access have access. We have consolidated all the data from all those systems that I was talking about that was sitting everywhere and wasn't talking to each other. And now the obviously governance is happy because they can monitor, they can check, and they can make sure that we are in fact reaching all of our outcomes. So I'm going to hand over to Tonderai now. Thank you so much.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this time. Leanri, thank you for the time, and also to CUT for allowing us to walk this journey with them. I get the pleasure of walking you through some of the work that we did, but not from a presentation or theoretical standpoint, but more from a practical and operational point of view in terms of what it actually meant to take all of this data, consolidate it, and put it into a manner that they could utilize to drive their insights and decision-making. Unfortunately, from a time point of view, this is almost like a relay. I got the baton last, and I have to run the hardest and the fastest, so I will be quite quick in my presentation. I guess key to the work that we've been doing is, in order for it to become evident and value realized in a short space of time, we embarked on a proof of value over a 10-week period. The reason it was time boxed is the moment it goes into anything over 3 months, 6 months, it becomes a full-blown project. And what we wanted very quickly and upfront was an instant validation that if we were to bring or introduce a unified data and analytics platform, it would truly drive the value. I think from a CUT point of view, and especially the SIL team, what we were fortunate with within these series of steps was to get a clear and defined understanding of their need. Their need was predominantly based on that premise of student success. What we wanted to help them shape was, what does student success really look like if you're actually interacting with the data? Adding to this, we also wanted to make sure from a design and platform setup, we could configure and actually put something that would be utilizable within that specific duration. From a testing and adoption, it needed to be fit for purpose. I think key to the challenges we've seen, and also some of the conversations that we've undertaken, as much as we're able to define the frameworks, to define the concept, as well as the behavioral frameworks, when it actually gets to implementation and how it's used and operationalized, that also becomes a challenge in its own right. And I think additionally to that as well, having completed the proof of value, it was important to ensure that we had a blueprint that we could use for rollout. In commencing with this journey, there was the data part. I think what we're witnessing across most institutions is that on an annual basis, institutions are accumulating 75 terabytes plus of data, and this is depending on the size and nature of the institution. More importantly, the data sits in various formats, sizes, devices, and equipment. We're seeing it across multiple non-integrated systems, and it's in vast quantities. Ironically so, a lot of institutions are wanting to do a lot with the data. Unfortunately, the data is not of the quality that allows you to work and act fast. So I think imperative and some of the key lessons we learned was, how do we get to a point where the data is in a format it can be used and used readily time and time again? What we were also able to do with this data is we were able to consolidate it on a unified platform where it would all reside and be utilized for insights, decision-making, and visualization purposes. Before I actually go on to the system itself, I think it's good to share context in terms of how does the platform itself actually work and sit. What we have is a unified data and analytics platform that also leverages AI. From a user point of view, if I'm talking from it from a top to bottom point of view, it allows all business units and all divisions and business units that sit within those divisions to be able to interact. That becomes your user interface. Be you a engineer in terms of actually ensuring that data and how it is managed and set up is done. If you're an administrator in terms of understanding what the data is saying and how you collaborate with teaching and learning, or if you're a student and there's interaction in terms of how the department actually says, given these identified students, what are those interventions and actions that we need to do next? Because it's unified, it does a series of things quite well. From a prepare point of view, it allows you to integrate and interact with all your data sources. So it brings that all onto the platform and puts that on a data lake for you to be able to use. From an analyze point of view, it starts to transform and curate the data so that you can get value. Depending on the use cases you're looking to run, your data is then tiered into different data sets that allow you to run the most basic of queries and insights right through to your most complex queries, given what you're trying to do. Your data, depending on its nature, be it real-time or stored in a database or warehouse, it also allows you to fulfill real-time streaming right through to your typical reporting given historic data. That data becomes fundamental. And I think at the core phase, most of the individuals here is where they operate. They're looking to understand what is coming through the data, what do we do with it, and given the timelines we're being asked to act, how do we move with speed? Because we know the nature of data and how data should also be managed, what the platform also does quite succinctly, it starts allowing you to do your governance, your security. It allows for data quality on an ongoing basis. And from an integration point of view, it is set up to run with multiple APIs already set up for you to be able to integrate and act. Your source systems can be multiple. In this specific instance, from a CUT point of view, we took data from Blackboard, we took data from ITS, and we also took data from some of their residing systems where we needed to actually create a profile at a student level. I think over that 10-week period, we were able to ingest up to about 1 million records for what we needed to do. Okay, so as it stands now, I'm on the interface of the visualization tool on AWS. This specific service that we use for visualization is called Amazon Quick. And what Amazon Quick allows you to do is to curate all your data, bring it into a single source, and run specific visualizations in line with your use case. From a CUT point of view, as Leanri had indicated, indication from a student success was for them to start understanding from the indicators, can we identify students at risk given key factors? Having identified students at risk, can we also see the courses at risk, also given indicators? What that profile and simulation would then allow them to do is to quickly intervene where those students resided. What Amazon Quick also allows you to do is over and above do your visualization, it also gives you access to AI capability to then drill down on key information and data that resides within that. What we did is we built 3 specific intelligence views, starting from an institutional level, then moving into a student profile, and then lastly, course profile. Apologies, my data is currently loading. As it is right now, I am on the instance on our cloud that we've put together, and this is actually running off that version. This is the institutional view. The way we've designed the institutional view is to initially give you a 10,000-foot view of where the institution is from a performance point of view. More importantly, because the indicators run from critical risk to on track, what we wanted the department to have early insight into is if we've got instances where our students currently are at risk, can we immediately have that information on hand? What you're also able to do is to filter out, depending on the time frame you're looking at, the faculty you're in, as well as the qualification type. So given the data that was available on Blackboard and ITS, we were able to simulate the critical risk students. We were also able to simulate the critical courses, the average grade that is coming through within, this is across the institution, overall attendance, as well as LMS engagement. And just from a snapshot, let me just, I can filter on 2 years. Just from a snapshot, what you start immediately seeing is that whilst your overall attendance is at 44%, your LMS engagement was sitting at 88%, and your average grade is at 58. And if you were to drill down on your critical risk, it will then give you lower level detail across both your student as well as your course risk. We've also been able to dissect the information at a faculty level, so you're not only limited to seeing what's happening at an institutional level. It goes down into faculty, and within that faculty, you're also able to understand from a student and a course perspective. If I just quickly go into student success, what your student success view starts to do across those indicators that we've identified, it starts to show you which students sit within the different categories. Within the sessions I was able to attend during the conference, I must say DUT, UFS have also done some very good work in terms of actually taking and expanding further on their framework and indicators and beginning to put visualizations to that. And I must say with this ongoing work, and the ability to co-create and collaborate, we can actually have visualizations and intelligence that will expedite and ensure that institutions are able to do what they're required to do from a student success point of view. In this instance, you've got the student profiles across the risk indicators. You have the students listed in terms of your critical risk. Within the drop-down, you're able to change that view and drill down according to that specific indicator. And at the bottom here, it starts showing you a student profile indicative of their engagement. So why is this important? As SILT, they're able to go onto the platform on Monday, run a view of their LMS and ITS data, and identify at-risk students on that day. And let's just say hypothetically, they've got an SLA that says within 10 days time or 15 days time within the month, they should have intervened. On Monday, they already start to proactively engage. From a automation and engagement, you're able to interact and contact the students. You're also able to engage and start ensuring that what the shortcomings are, they should be effectively doing, and you're able to report on that. So from a control and a protocol mechanism, we're now moving away from having to wait until the term is over to intervene. We're able to do that as the data allows us to do. I'm going to pause there because I have run out of time, and I think our facilitator will take us through the next stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all the three of you. I mean, it's great stuff. Unfortunately, I think we've run out of time. With your permission, allow me to bring this session to an end, but I'd like to let you know that you are free to interact with them. If you have any questions, they will also have a stand outside tomorrow. So you can visit them on the stand and you can get more information about these very interesting initiatives. Once again, can you join me in thanking our three colleagues for their input? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Leanri.
Thanks very much, everybody. So that brings to a closure today's proceedings, and we now move on to the fun part of the program in terms of the cocktail function that will be taking place this evening. Right, so there you can see we're currently in the OR Tambo room, which is room 60. We are going to be in Terminal B for the cocktail function. So it's 6 for 6:30, so we've got about 90 minutes now to go and get dressed in our traditional heritage cultural clothes, and then we can arrive there. A reminder to please wear your name tags. There's another big event that's taking place in the Boma where I've got the big cross. It's the Nahawu conference taking place. So you'll see lots of red people wearing red. So please, can we have our Siyaphumelela people wearing our lanyards so that we can control access as well. And please make sure you don't follow the crowds to the party at the Boma. Please come to the Terminal B. Thanks very much, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.